Hi, welcome back to Know Your Rights. All right, it's time to talk about a hot topic that I've seen increase in the past couple years, especially with the pandemic. A lot of parents now are considering pulling their kids out of the public school system and sending them to a private school or a charter school, which is fine. I'm going to say for the record, I have no problem with that. Here's my issue. Private schools and charter schools, depending on how the charter is written, are not required to have special education personnel. I'm going to say that one more time. Charter schools, depending on how their charter is written, because there are some charter schools, their charter is written where their county that they're in will provide the special education personnel to that school, but not all of them are written that way. And for private schools, they're not required, y'all. They're not required. So if you want your child to go to a private school, I need you to understand that there's a strong possibility that they will not receive services. But we're going to get deep dive into it. Okay. In the parental rights, there is a section about private school placement, okay? So let's talk about it. So the school system is not required to pay your tuition if you decide to send your child to private school, okay? They're not required to pay that. The only time that they might pay for it, and again, check your state's parental rights booklet in the section where it says private school placement at public expense. The only reason why that will happen is if a child with a disability who has previously received special education services and related services from the school system has been enrolled by their parents in a private school without the consent of or referred by the school system due to a disagreement, okay, about the provisions of free and appropriate education, a court may require the school system to reimburse the parents for the cost of that enrollment if the court finds that the school system had not made a free, appropriate education available to the child in a timely manner prior to that enrollment, and that the private school placement is appropriate. I said a mouthful. So basically, you can't be like, oh, I don't like what the label that they made my child eligible for, so I'm going to take them to private school. They're not going to pay for that, okay? They're not going to pay for that. They're not going to pay for that. It has to be where, let's say, they violated the 60-day timeline when it was time for them to test your child and render them services. It has to be court mandated, basically, and they have to prove, or you have to prove, your lawyers have to prove that they did not provide the services in a timely manner or the appropriate services. So that's the only way. So that's probably not going to happen. So let's get real into it with the private school placement. When you are considering, I need you to consider before you just pull your child out. Let's say you were considering taking your child out of special education and putting them in private schools. Now, because they have an active IEP with the school, you have to let the school know you put them in private school. I'm going to say that again. If you decide to put your child in a private school, you have to let the school system know you put them there. Why? Because it's still the school's responsibility, school district's responsibility to service that child. And I'll make a video about child fine, but the school district is mandated to find all the children that have a disability. So let's say you decide to pull them out and put them in private school. They're technically still supposed to service that child. So let me slow down. If that happens, you need to contact the school district that the private school is located. I'm going to use Atlanta for example. I live in Fulton County. If I decide to put my child in a private school that's in Gwinnett County, right, I will call Gwinnett County to say, hey, my child goes to a private school in your district. They were receiving speech therapy services. Can you send someone to the private school to render their services? And it's just as simple as that. But remember, you have to call the school district that the private school is located. Also, too, back to the private school does not have to service your child. Your private school can make a service plan. I'm saying that again. The private school can make a service plan, which is basically like an IEP, but it doesn't have all those pages. It basically tells you what goals they're going to address and what services they're able to give to your child. And, you sign it, they sign it, and it's just like an IEP. But again, they can look at the IEP you bring and just say, okay, we can do this, 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 and this. But they are not held to the same umbrella as the public school, okay? So don't be that parent that run up there and, want to get onto the private school and make a whole scene. They are not covered under these parental rights. So make sure when you are choosing a private school to ask those questions. Hey, my child has a specific learning disability and they're in fourth grade, but they're reading on a second grade level. Can you provide these interventions to close that gap? Okay. So make sure whatever state you're in to read under the private school placement or parentally placed private school students to know all the rights that you have when you do decide to put your child in private school. I need you to understand this whole thing before you just pull them out just because you don't like the disability label. You just don't like the whole, we have to think about our kids. What is the best placement that gap is going to close from where they are to where they need to be, and then to make the best decision there. Okay? If you have any questions, make sure you leave them in the comments.